in the Industrial Revolution, you saw, car making go from something bespoke, 1 car per day, to a factory making 1,000, same for clothing, same for farms. And, we've looked at technology as this huge accelerant, but we really haven't had the industrial revolution for technology. It's still pretty bespoke, one developer writing code. And now you have this idea where, go back to a place where you spend a lot of time, travel search, yes. Right? You could have one agent do 1,000 or an agent and 1,000 instances of it do 1,000 searches for you and find what you're looking for.
Right.
We haven't seen that in technology yet. And I think that's the era we're really about to go into, which ties back to, the point that you said that you were having on your walk around efficiency for society.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it in the context of what we've called business intelligence, right? We've been investors in companies like Tableau, obviously Snowflake, et cetera, over the years. And, it's not really business intelligence, right? Issuing me a report that tells me how many black T-shirts I sold yesterday, right, is nice, but it's not all that informative. What you would like is an agent to scour all of your data, compare it to all the data of other companies and say, here's something that is anomalous, or we can predict something or suggest something based upon patterns we're seeing in other businesses. That's all, we've been talking about that for a decade, right?
Yeah.
I actually think we're getting a lot closer to that moment where now we're going to be able to have these resources, because what do these things do really well, Bill? They devour data, they spot patterns, and they predict.
Yes.
Right?
Take what you said times 1,000. It shouldn't be a single agent. It could be 1,000 of them doing it on your data.
The value is not in the model, right? Just like the value is not in storage, right? You could say storage is a part of the AWS cloud, but there's not a lot of value in that thing unto itself. The value is in the enterprise relationship. The value is in, right, the penumbra of services that you're offering to your customers. So Microsoft and Google are out tonight. Both clouds accelerated their growth on the back of AI. 64% of Fortune 500 customers are now Azure OpenAI customers, which I thought was pretty extraordinary.
Big number.
That's
GitHub Copilot growing 35% quarter over quarter. And the number of use cases seem absolutely wild. And what's even crazier is Satya said on the call, the revenue growth would be even higher, but they're GPU constrained. Yes, you heard me say it, Bill. They're GPU constrained. We'll come back to that. So I look at this and, GCP is accelerating. Azure's accelerating. My assumption is we heard it out of ServiceNow. Their demand, is accelerating. So clearly enterprises are finding value and use, in this. So Sunny, talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing. I know you have 100,000 developers in the long tail now using, or I think a lot of big enterprises as well, using the Grok Cloud. But what are these enterprise use cases, and are you surprised when you see these hyperscalers racking up these numbers?
I'm not surprised. And let me level up the question for a quick second into where is that spend coming from? And right now, and this is even verified by this report that Andreessen Horowitz put out a couple of weeks ago around enterprise AI. And what they really showed is the distribution of use is coming from IT to the business units to support, and it's not in these innovation arms. Because when usually you see these technologies, when they're there, you understand that the budgets are limited. So that's awesome. They also, just as a relative point, they showed that folks are tripling their AI spend this year. Right. And so that kind of lines up to what we're seeing there.
Right. And we'll show these slides.
Yeah, we'll show these charts there. And, I think the most interesting thing, and I'll get into the use cases, that 82% of the respondents said they are either already on open source or will move to open source. So that's the interesting fact that's happening there. The use cases really, and, we got a little bit of alpha from Michael Dell a couple of weeks ago when, he really talked to us about this use case for enterprise RAG, right? Where there's all this data and I want to be able to reason over that data with a model. I think we don't really talk about it enough, but if you think about a business, this is happening all over the place all the time.
Right.
And we see a ton of use cases still there, where whether it's a daily report or whether it's something you send out to your customers, and all of that coming out of those enterprise systems and being sent out.
I mean, Bill, do you remember, 18 months ago, pre-ChatGPT, I imagine less than 5% of enterprises in this, were building AI production use cases. Today, I don't know an enterprise that's not at least running a test use case.
Well, you said what was the percentage? There it wasn't 100.
No, but that was 64% using Azure.
Yeah,
but I think it's probably close to 100%. I can't imagine a company in the S&P 500 that's not at least testing AI, right?
Yeah.
You would really have to be asleep. Do you remember any other technologies that went from zero to ubiquity this fast? I mean, maybe the internet itself. People said, "Oh my God, I got to get on the internet."
Mobile.
Right.
I think mobile. Although this one, but I don't think that's a secret. We've talked about how the incumbents moved very quickly here, and I think you can give OpenAI a lot of credit because they were out selling the mission and out talking to the customer base and doing everything they could to promote.
It's also easy to use. Like when you talked about some of these other technologies, like going to cloud was like a real effort.
Right.
Using AI.
You had to migrate your entire database.
Exactly. You had to do a lot of real work. Yeah. This is an API call.
Right.
Like, and again, credit to OpenAI. They're the ones that led everyone down that path. And everyone else now is OpenAI compatible or has a similar looking API. It's very easy to use.
And part of the reason, one of the things, you mentioned Michael Dell. He tweeted the other day this Barclays survey that I thought was really fascinating. So this is among enterprise CIOs moving back to hybrid and on-prem. The number was that 83% of respondents said that they were going to repatriate at least some of their workloads, right, back to on-prem. And that was up from 49% or 43% in 2020, right? And so I think it's an interesting case that you're moving back. My sense is it's because they don't trust certain data in the cloud, right? So they don't want to run maybe code generation, tools in the cloud. And the other one is just data gravity. Maybe they have on-prem databases and they don't want the cost and the headache associated with moving that to the cloud. Do you see this in other parts of your world, Sonny?
Yeah, definitely. I'll add a third one, which is I think there's still a lack of trust. And this gets expanded every time. We had that interview with the OpenAI CTO where they asked her, "Hey, have you trained this on, data?" And she didn't answer the question quite well. And so I think, and I've heard this, in conversations with hyperscalers where customers will not trust, and hyperscaler will legally sign that they will not train. They still will not trust that.
Right.
They believe that all these stories around the data make these models better, that everyone just wants a way to get access to that data to make the models better. So I think the combination of those three factors is 100% what we see. And so what happens, with us, which is just, basically maybe a pattern, people come and try something in the cloud, make sure that it works, and then immediately want to get on the phone with you and say, "Hey, can I get this on-prem?"
Interesting.
Or at least sequestered.
Or sequestered, yeah. Like I use on-prem as like some virtual private
I thought there were two things in these podcasts that we keep referencing that relate to the enterprise decision-making. One, Zuck said something that kind of makes sense to me. He just said cramming data in the context window feels a little hacky. Or I don't know what his exact words were. And so I think there's still this future in front of us where data gets deeper integrated in the model and the trust issues there, and we don't quite know how that's all going to come together. It's still TBD.
Yes.
Yeah. And you guys probably haven't tried it because it's just not, feasible if you're not a developer, but using like 1 million, context, like a context window of like 1 million tokens, it's like really hard.
Yes. You can't use it up, you're saying.
Well, you can use it up, but the amount of gathering and work you have to do to get 1 million, think about it. It's like several books, And so people talk about it like it's this wonderful thing, but it's not, overly usable.
And then the other one, I thought the most interesting thing out of the Sam podcast was he talked about whether or not developers were kind of going wholesale on top of OpenAI or whether they were just using it in a lightweight way and then doing a bunch of stuff externally. And he implied that most people are doing the latter But then he said, if you do that, we're going to steamroll you and you need to bet on us being successful, and which would mean dumping your data and trusting OpenAI more fully. I don't know. What was your interpretation of what he was trying to say?
It was exactly that, plus the following. If you take his, take him for what he was saying, which is the models are going to get better.
Yes.
Well, what room does it leave for anything else? Because if you shouldn't be taking a model and wrapping it with your own, your own code or your own technology or framework, and then you're going to assume the model gets better. Well, why do you need whatever I'm building if the model can just do everything?
I actually thought Sam and Brad were really articulate on this point, whether you believe them or not. And I think it was consistent with the tweet that Aaron Levy sent out yesterday, which is people are not thinking ambitiously enough as to where these things are going. And, today we're really in the land of answers, right? We're running some RAG over some, HR data that we have in our company and building a little chat bot so it can answer questions more efficiently than my HR group can answer questions. But they were saying it really needs to think about agentic thinking. Like, what is that multi-step reasoning that can be done in the business? And, I know
how big's your HR group?
Well, here it's pretty easy to do. But, so my sense is that I'm kind of in this Aaron Levy camp that when you look out 2 or 3 years, I mean, listen, every week we're blown away by, how these models are progressing. It's hard for me to think in 3 years at the rate of progress and the amount of investment that's going into this, that we're not going to be a lot further down the path in terms of this reasoning. And when we get there, I think people are going to want that to be more proprietary, because I think the advantages that are going to inure to the enterprise are even more. Let me throw one other thing in here. I was sitting with my team this week and we're trying to figure out who are the winners and losers, not of the providers of the arms, but the buyers of the arms, okay? So if every Fortune 500 company is buying AI, one of the things that Bill often reminds me is, fine, it will give a little improvement to an airline that starts using AI, but airlines are a competitive industry and they're just going to compete away all the profits. And so that's a defensive move, right? You don't actually improve the business model because all the earnings get competed away. So what you want to find is a market leader, somebody who has 70 or 80% of a given market who gets to hang on, right, to all of this.
Or compound their lead.
Right, or compound their lead. And so, there's a company coming public in a few weeks called Lineage, which is in the cold storage business. So they basically are an integral part of the food supply chain. Any refrigerated storage of food. And I think they have a huge percentage of the market. And I think they have 50 data analysts and scientists now in San Francisco, because if they can turn the screw 1/4 of an inch on spoilage, 1/4 of an inch on energy consumption to keep this food cold.
All bottom line.
And so it's all to their bottom line. And by the way, it doesn't get competed away, right? And so they're looking at leveraging, I happen to know because they were a Snowflake customer and they were using some Snowflake AI, to improve these use cases. And so I think there are going to be a whole host of businesses, Bill, industrial businesses that capture some of these profits and get to hold on to them.
I'd be interested in Sonny's reaction to your question and maybe to my answer, which is when I meet a company and see them using AI in a way that feels like ultra compelling from a improvement of their own strategic business position, it's almost always a more traditional AI model that's running a very particular optimization problem. It's not an LLM application. And this stuff's all happening simultaneously,
I think that's true. I don't think it particularly matters, because what generative AI has done, what the ChatGPT moment has done, is it's caused every enterprise to get off their ass to get all their data organized, because that's a condition required to benefit from any of this stuff. But then I think what they do figure out along the way is some basic, machine learning around time series or forecasting or things that have been around for quite a while, Bill, is where they get the most bang for the buck. Maybe not from the generative AI, but they might get there because they got into the pool because they were motivated by generative AI.
Maybe.
I certainly think it's an accelerant based on everything we're seeing.
Yeah, I'll disagree with you. I think, what this technology really enables is, we get spoiled in Silicon Valley because we can get the best engineers to build like the most difficult things. But I think for the average business to do most problems, whether it was, pre-generative AI, was very, very difficult. Now you can basically take a generative AI model and have it do one of the most advanced things in the world. And, we've shared an example in our chat, right, where you can take a picture of a plate of food and tell it to return to you what's in that food and how many calories might it be and what's the portion size, right? That's done sort of, again, with one prompt. And so now you've given that ability to every business, every small business, right? Yeah. So like this business you're talking about, they can do a lot of improvements without having to have 50 people in San Francisco. So I think that's where the improvements are really going to come.
Although I could push back on you and use your own statement about OpenAI, and if they achieve everything, that thing may be commoditized just because.
Well, someone still has to take it and apply it to that business, right? And it may just be the one tech person in that business.
I was on a walk last weekend with a great economist over at Stanford, and we were talking about about the amount of productivity improvement that would be unleashed into the economy because of AI. And what was interesting is, productivity's actually been under assault in this country because we've limited immigration, which was a huge source of productivity, because deglobalization is actually hurting productivity, because we're not moving the productions of goods and services to the lowest cost places, anything that's causing friction. So he's like, all the goodness to come out of AI, we need it just to replace the headwinds that we have on productivity in other places.